Camera पर Okay, good, good. Okay, so let's start. Congress is back to session from its recess this morning. We are on the order of the day. Next item, Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, item 14, standing committee reports. There are none.
Okay, next item.
Item 15, special committee report.
Okay, Vice Speaker Moses or Chairman of the committee to wait on the President. You have the
Thank
floor.
you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon to you and members, those observing within the facilities and outside. Your committee to wait met with the President, Vice President, Cabinet, and key staff right after session. And those who were in attendance were myself, Chairman Perman, Chairman Neth, and our staff, Stephanie Ritland. And we went in and there was an agenda already prepared by the President, and it goes in the order of this. The number one item on the agenda was the COVID-19 update. Number two on the agenda was the economic stimulus package proposal that has been submitted to Congress. Item number three was the status of field trip vessels. And item number four were the two pending nominations, that is of Casillomida for the Insurance Board and Shanti Asher for the Consul General position in our Honolulu Consulate Office. So let me start with item number one, the COVID-19 update. The President has informed us that he has a package that he has sent totaling in the amount of 20 million. 18 million is what the total amounts to right now. and 2 million is in the proposed budget for the 2020-21 fiscal year, and he's hoping that that 2 million will help carry us over into the new fiscal year. In the president's update, he mentioned that he submitted an expenditure report to Congress. Also, we were given, excuse me, in the meeting, a COVID-19 preparedness response snapshot, which gives us a sort of a bullet point run through of what the states have been doing to prepare themselves to prepare us in case the virus actually lands within the FSM. And so the states are at various stages of trying to prepare, with some actually sending in proposed designs for isolation rooms, quarantine chambers, and some have been sending in upgrades of the facilities they are using now to quarantine incoming passengers, or the incoming passengers that were allowed during that period. And the president has been referencing his presidential declaration of March 14th, 2020, which expires today, and he's asking Congress for an extension to that in the amount of 90 days. Or if we can do it by resolution here, or if we can't be able to do that, extended for 90 days, what they have informed us is that they're going to reissue another declaration today if nothing is done in Congress. And they've updated us that for Pohnpei, they have started with the construction process on 18 rooms, and they're probably looking to increase that to 20. And it's going to be ICU units that they might be able to convert into isolation rooms. In YAP, they've mentioned that they would like to construct more isolation rooms, and that all states have sort of identified their sources from the compact funding in the health section to help with these preparation needs. Chuk has also renovated some buildings with them, and they are also using the Chuk High School, I believe, as quarantine facilities if need be, and they're also using the High Tide Hotel. In Koshai, they're using some barracks from the Chinese, I believe, and they're also looking for extra quarantine areas or isolation rooms. The president is also trying to work closely with the states, and he is facing challenges due to the nature of our makeup of the 5 governments of the FSM, where as the states have been handling their own affairs with regards to running the healthcare operations within the 4 states. And they are not accustomed to the healthcare business or the healthcare procedures being interfered by the national government. However, they're working very closely with the states to come up with a comprehensive plan to prepare ourselves in case the virus hits. Now, they've identified funding sources from the U.S. Department of Labor for unemployment benefits, which we are told that we are eligible for. However, I believe probably I'm now getting into the stimulus portion of the report. They've identified 7.7 million from the 50 odd million that the U.S. Has made available, that the FSM is allowed access to about 7.7 million of that, and the unemployment insurance package to receive 5 million. And this will be scrutinized as to who pays the taxes, and that's how they will be identified at this point. We were told that other earners of income, which include farmers and fishermen and trades, sales people, we have women's groups that also sell sewing products, and also some in the handicraft. So in the trades and crafts area, it's very hard to determine how or if they will be able to receive a portion of that funding that will be made available due to non-tax payments by these individual income earners that we have. So that's going to be a challenge for the president and probably the states to determine on how they will handle those income earners that fall outside our tax brackets. The president states that one of the highest priorities on his list is the stimulus package due to the fact that this worldwide pandemic is having an effect on mainly our tourism industry first, but then it may affect other industries very soon. So the president says he's working closely with the states and trying to come up with further suggestions on how we should move forward. But there is basically a plan already that was sent to us on Friday and some over the weekend detailing the COVID-19 update, expenditure reports, and our preparedness plan that includes the health and the economic stimulus package that he sent. However, I believe that members have yet to really go into detail in those packages. I know that the tax proposal has been read by some, and the president would like us to look at that as well. Now, in that tax plan, he's proposing a temporary authorization to the Secretary of Finance to waive and determine on tax waivers that he sees fit. Now, that authority has some questions with members, and I'm hoping that our Ways and Means Committee would handle that accordingly. There are a lot of minute details, and they're kind of spread throughout the proposed bill, and I, for one, have some questions on it that are not clarified, and hopefully in a day or two, our chairman of Ways and Means will look into that. Now, on the field trip vessels, the president is working closely with the 4 states, and he's having some difficulty even in interstate travel, even intrastate travel, which means travels within one's own state. They're having to quarantine individuals, even crew. And this goes for the airlines too. And that's why we're having problems with CIA service throughout the FSM. Now, we're having these quarantine issues with the states of Yap, Pohnpei, Chuk, and we're having some with Koshai. One of the vessels left yesterday, I understand, from the president, and it's on its way to Koshai. And it will be a non-contact unloading and loading of the vessel, and then it will be on its way back to service Pingalap, Mukil, and on its way back to Pohnpei, and then to the southern islands of Pohnpei, then on to Chuk and Yap. And this concern from the president is with regards to all the vessels operating within the FSM. I believe there was expressed concern about the transshipment of fish, and that they're working hard with Norma and the fishing vessels to try and find a way that they could transship their vessels without being quarantined 14 days. Now, some exceptions in the declaration have been given to some companies that service to Pohnpei and Koshai. And President expressed that he and the governor had some sort of resolution to the quarantine period of interstate travel with vessels and with airlines. And that is why APA is still coming in. Our fuel ships and also service goods that come in by cargo through sea are still coming in, as there were some states that indicated that they were probably going to close off the seaports as well. So the president stated to us in our meeting this morning that he has talked with the state leadership and that the ports will remain open. However, they will monitor the operations and transfer of goods and services very closely so that human contact is minimized. Also, I guess the issue of the Chinese goods that are being held up in Guam with regards to medical equipment is going to be addressed by the Department of Foreign Affairs and also TCNI for if it's freight or if it's what's holding these goods up. There was also mention of test kits that will be provided to the FSM. And if the figure or the amount of test kits would be in the area of 1,000 to Chuk, 1,000 to Pohnpei, 500 to Koshai, and 500 to Yap. And this is a very quick test, and I believe there has to be a redundancy in place where you take it 2 times, if I remember correctly. And then lastly, on the issue of the airport in Ta, which Florida Leader Harper wanted me to raise, was that the president had a lengthy talk with the contractor, and he's addressed, he's asked TCNI to address the issue because his fear now is that we cancel the contract, that it would take a lot more years to find another contractor to fill in the void. So he's trying very much to minimize the time and have the contractor mobilized for that project. And then, let's see, on the I think that's what I can muster together for an oral report. The detailed report will probably be submitted on the daily order of business tomorrow, and I'm hoping that Chairman Perman will help me fill in the blanks here. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's what I have for you today.
Okay, make your motion for adoption.
I move for the adoption of the oral report.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded that Congress adopt the oral special committee report submitted by Speaker Moses and members of the committee to wait on the president. Any discussion? Chairman Berman, you care to supplement, clarify some of the points made by...
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon to you and all honorable members. Well, basically, what's to associate myself with Vice Speaker or Chairman of the Committee to Wait on the President. One of the concerns that we put up because of what the governor, all the states' governor declaration on banning the interstate traveling between the states, and we actually raised that the concern that I raised with the president that, you know, sooner or later he must flex his muscles. Sooner or later he has to really sit down and says we need to do something. For instance, I'll give you an example of why I'm asking this, because right now, if the ship goes from Pohnpei to Chuk, it will be quarantined for, or not based on the declaration of the governor of Chuk declaration. So I think those kind of issues that on the president can try to convince the governors, because this morning there's two of our citizens that's actually got stuck on their what you call that, the um, observers that been out there for over 20 days, and because of the declaration from the states, they couldn't come in. I think the president called the governor up and says, whether you like it or not, we're going to bring in our citizens, because they've been out there for 24 days, over 14 days. And if they ended up in a country that won't help them, what will happen to them? So I think he advised, or he asked his FSM police to, or surveillance to go and bring them in. So they're back in Pohnpei, those that's actually coming to Pohnpei. So that's one of the concern we raised, that some of the declaration that been made by the state, if somehow, we have to discuss with the governors on how we handle things. Another concern that we have is they're concentrating on the state are concentrating on the quarantine, mostly on the quarantine. And if you go around, I don't know what's happening in Chuk, but in Pohnpei, if you go around, socializing, or the Easter functions are still happening, the sakao, the fundraising, and stuff like that, where I believe the governor can, somehow put in his declaration that socializing or activities with the church and sakao things should be stopped, and they should concentrate on that to stop that. Let's not wait until we have corona on island and then we react to it. And I made an example for U.S., with all due respects to America, that they waited till they have started having infected showing up, and then that's when they start doing this isolation. I think for us, we concentrate, the national government can concentrate on the quarantine, and then let the state should start practicing self-isolation, or so people, when it gets to the FSM, we have a little bit of control on cases, if there is or there are. I mean, what else? I think that's it for now. That if something comes up, Vice Speaker or Chairman of the committee can elaborate on it. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Berman. Any discussion on the further discussion on the
Mr. Speaker, if I
oral
may,
report? Who's that?
me, Moses.
Oh, go ahead, Vice Speaker Moses. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing that I missed, which was brought up during our mock session, and then it was also brought up with the President, with respects to letting our citizens who are stuck in Guam and Hawaii and elsewhere return to the island. And the question was put forth to the President, and the response was he's not ready he's not ready to open up. However, that was sort of delegated to the states. However, he feels that we are not ready to allow back our citizens, as they are in areas where the healthcare facilities are much better than ours. And if we open up at this time, we might not be able to accommodate one or two people who are infected with the diseases, which has the potential to multiply due to not having the proper equipment and personnel equipped to deal with these people coming in if they are carriers of the virus. So he felt that he is not comfortable to be opening up to allowing people back in and disembarking from airlines. So I just wanted to mention that. It was mentioned during the committee to wait, but I missed it on the oral report.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Moses. That is true. but he's saying something that is not, in line with his own declaration of March 14th. He actually opened up travel from Guam and Honolulu. So what is he trying to do? Pass on that responsibility to the states when in fact he has in place a paragraph in his own March 14th declaration saying that he's opening up Guam and Honolulu. So we need to look at that. That's why we said he should take responsibility of the entire border control thing to make it consistent and clear. Okay, any further discussion, gentlemen, members? Any further discussion on the report?
Speaker.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon to you and members. Join us in thanking the Vice Speaker and the delegation for representing us in that committee debate. Mr. Speaker, you reported that Mr. Vice Speaker, you reported that to fund the COVID-19 response framework, we will need 20 million. And of that, you said that 2 million is in the FY 2020 budget. Is that the 2 million increase in the mitigation fund? Is that the specific amount we're referring to or referencing to the 2 million mitigation fund? If we can address that first, then I have a follow-up question. In the budget, there's a 2 million increase in the tourism sector mitigation fund, 2 million. Is that the fund that is referencing?
That is correct.
Vice Chairman Balik, I think you're speaking about the FY21 budget, the submission. Is that the one you're referring to, or?
That's correct. That's correct. FY 2021, there's a 2 million under the CIP budget for tourism sector mitigation fund.
Vice Speaker Moses, you have any clarification of that?
Yes, that is the intent, is to place it in the tourism mitigation fund that we established during the last session. And he did this so that when we enter the next fiscal year, we have some money available to use if so need be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker Moses. Further discussion, go ahead, Senator Balik, you still have the floor.
Yeah, if I may follow up. So the remaining 18 million, I read the transmittal from the Secretary of Finance on the report and update on the funds that the 1.2 million we gave them earlier on. And in the supplemental part of that report, he identified sources of funds. And in his transmittal, there are funds that he said were secured and in the pipeline. That's the 18 million we're referring to. First question, and how secure are we, how sure are we on those other funding? I actually went through the report and identified some of the sources that they identified as sources. For example, let me use the sector grant carryover. He stated that 7 million will be drawn from the, has been approved by CHEMCO for all 4 states to use. And of that 7 million, I know, for example, for Coxsackie State, they've submitted a request to use 1.2 million for their isolation ward, isolation facility. So I'm trying to understand whether the remaining 18 million funds have been identified for, and does that include the sector grant carryover?
Vice Speaker, you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To address the issue was raised whether the funding sources that were identified were actually going to be utilized with ease because as you know, historically, our funding from the compact sector grants have been very discretionary and not discretionary on our part. So I asked the question to see whether or not it will be available for us to use. And the response I got from the President and the Secretary of Finance was that these funds, OIA is working diligently on having these funds available, I believe, within the next week or so. So they're assuring us that these funds will be available for our use in our preparedness efforts for this particular time that we're in. And then the rest of the funds are coming from grants and other donor partners that have identified sources that we could use. And there was an array of areas that they were going to tap into so that we don't have to use probably the most sure available source, which is our trust fund. So they assured us that we do not need to touch the trust fund. What they're proposing to Congress through, I forget the bill number, or if that has been assigned yet, but our 20% automatic contributions into the trust fund by the fishing fees and the 50% MRA funding required by law to also contribute into our trust fund. What they want to do is temporarily divert that into this coronavirus 19 mitigation plan that they have sent up to us. So the total amount that has been identified so far is 18 million. And this is that we don't, they've been working diligently to identify this funding because they understand that there are several proposals to actually touch our trust fund, these proposals were made when the information available to us now was not within our understanding due to lack of communications that have come through, because most of these items have been recently identified. Some of them have been changing or improved accessibility within the past several days. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker Morris. I still have anything else? Senator Palit, you still have the floor.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Vice Speaker. Regarding the carryover sector grant, it's not only the speed at which the fund could be drawn, but I think we need to work with OIA so they can waive the requirements. For example, bidding and other bonding requirements, those technical issues that would slow us in drawing the funds. I would hope that OIA would waive those requirements. You know, to the funds, again, I'm trying to figure out these funding sources. I totally support the idea of using our trust fund or drawing from our trust fund or allocation from the fishing fees and captive insurance as the last option. But when I look at the figures provided to us by finance, they actually categorize additional funding sources, 420,000 from CDC urgent grant, that's guaranteed, 840,000 from CDC as notified on April 2nd. And then there's that 7 million from CHEMCO approved sector carryover. And then there's a 470,000 ADB grant. You total that, that's about 8.7 million. And then there's a category of funds that they identify as pipeline sources actively seeking. And that includes the 200,000 US Embassy to increase the DAEF funding, about 3 million from the Pacific Disaster Resilience Fund, which ADB is amending to include global health pandemic. They expect to receive that by May. And then there's that 2.5 million funding that DECM and Finance is working with World Bank on the contingent emergency response component of the Maritime project. If I total that, that's about 5.7 million. And then there's this last category of pipeline sources where more work needs to be done. And I identified the 55 million US grant earmarked for the FAS as part of the US economic stimulus package. Of that 55 million, they're indicating that we anticipate to receive between 6 and 7 million or 8 million. Adding all of those, I come up with about 16, 17 million as funds that are secure or in the pipeline. And that's the figure I'm trying to reconcile. That's aside from the stimulus package. We understand that we gave them 1.2 million. The report that was provided to us by Secretary shows that they've used about 900-some thousand, leaving a balance about 305,000. So in my mind, I'm trying to reconcile what we have. I think timing is issue here. How quickly we can secure those funding and allow the states to move forward, whether it's for their response framework, COVID-19 preparation, or for the economic stimulus. There's a whole array of other legislation or amendment that we saw that would help address the economic stimulus package. I understand in the president's transmission that he actually phased out the economic stimulus package. Phase one is on the tourism sector, which is immediately impacted credits to address the tourism sector. Phase two, which there's no price to it yet, will address the other sectors of our economy. So thank you, Vice Speaker. I'm just trying to raise on the figure side, trying to understand where that 18 million is coming from. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Palik. Yes, indeed, we need to continue, questioning the executive, including the task force itself. I assume there will be some kind of a hearing with the task force, with the appropriate officials like the Secretary of Finance, with regards to all these figures that have been thrown around. So we can firm up all of them and see which ones will be okay, which ones will not come in time. So I think that's a job for Chairman Fikir and the Chairman HSA, Berman.
Speaker, I just add on, Speaker.
Okay.
Just want to add on.
Chairman Berman,
Bernie.
you have the floor.
Yes, just to add on to elaborate more on the isolation rooms. You remember back in the 20th Congress, we put money into the supplement to help with Pompey State kind of upgrade the hospital. And that's the morgue, the dialysis machines, and the 18 private rooms. And I'm glad that we did that because I think the 18 private rooms, I think they'll be converting that into not only ICU rooms, but also isolation rooms. But that's actually funded on the 20th Congress for 450,000 on the rooms. And right now they're looking, I think this 18 million, they'll be looking at it to add on to it to make sure that these rooms are completed. So I'm glad that we put money into the Congress put money to help the states. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker.
Is there a time, finishing time? Do we know, Chairman Berman? When will they finish those isolation ICU rooms?
As far as the 18 private, it's been awarded to 2 companies to start on it. They already awarded the bidding. So it's a matter of time. I think they know how urgent this COVID-19 is. So I'm pretty sure that they're gonna work. The construction will start soon. They will issue the notice to proceed soon.
Thank you. Okay, further discussion. Any further discussion?
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Vice Speaker Moses, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To sort of address Vice Chairman Palik's additions of which were very comprehensive. But the 18 million, I believe I was looking at the numbers that were provided, and they're constantly looking for extra funding. But the 7.7 million that they said, that would be between 6 and 8 million, and then they add on another 7 million from the compact funds, and then another 7 million from our diversions or proposed diversions of funds from the trust fund into this proposed package, which at the time we get to it, it's those three alone reach 20-some million. But the identified sources of funding excludes the 7.7 million with it that comes with the package that's from the United States. So when you add on the ADB that's already confirmed, and then the CDCs that are confirmed, the 14 million plus these go on, and it reached about 18 million. I know that in the package they have other sources that they're eyeing to add on, but it's a continuous process that they're trying to identify, and they're hoping that by May session we would have a better understanding, and they're also assuming that we're probably going to need more as we approach the regular session in May. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Moses. Yes, of course, we are looking at the total package for both the task force's needs and the economic stimulus is about 35 million. So we'll have to look at that bigger picture, see how we can. Of course, there's that breakdown of 20 and 15 for each of those packages, but it seems like it's an ongoing process. They're still looking at more funding, and hopefully they will find more funding for those. But with what they've reported so far, which I just want those committees to verify and firm up with the appropriate officials and the task force, then we should be in good hand. We should be able to progress with them. The idea, the immediate thing is for them to start using those funding. I think that's the idea, and we're very encouraged by the fact that, for example, the sector grants, unallocated funds will be started available next week or so. So it looks like, especially on the our preparation for the COVID-19, I think that's the urgent one. We need to have them in place so our people can be able to work with the with the states in addressing this crisis. Okay. Yes, Chairman Urusama.
Yeah,
You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a question on the issue of the carryover, and you term it as unallocated, but I think it's more like carryover. And are they talking about the states' carryover funds, or is this a national government carryover of the compacts? Since we don't have any compact money except for the
we do not have any carryover, do we?
Well, this carryover that the president is submitting is from what is supposed to be for the states?
Vice Speaker Moses, is it sourced from the states' carryovers, or that's?
Thank you, Mr. Yes, it is, and it's for construction and aid to the health sectors to help them prepare for the COVID or COVID-19 response plan that they've proposing. So I believe one of the challenges that we have now is it was just submitted to us, and we haven't fully gone into length from this. But yes, it is from the state's portions of the compact funding, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Speaker and Speaker.
Yeah, continue.
I hope we're not going to be looking at this carryover, and the states are also looking at. I understand I heard that YAP appropriated some carryover funds of 1.6. And I hope it's not part of what these of these 7 point something million that the president share with the committee to wait.
Vice Speaker, you can respond to that, but I think that is what is every source that we're using, both states and national government. Those are taken together as part of our overall, budgeting for this COVID-19 response plan. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm mistaken, Vice Speaker Moses.
You're correct.
So, Speaker, because this is a declared emergency, there is no question as to who should be appropriating the money. Is it going to be Congress, or it's going to be the state legislature, or it's going to be president and the governors? Or?
I believe it's the respective legislatures. If it's states, if it's the state's own carryovers. But I think for our national planning or nationwide planning, we need to account for all this funding, so we know how much each of the states or the national government we're giving up to help out on this COVID-19 response plan. I think that's a good thing. And in fact, if you look at the response plan, there is that entire budget breakdown. It's as the national government, it has each of the states' own, allocation or proposed expenditures, use of those funding. So it is a collaborative effort. I think it is a good thing. So we look at it more from a nationwide perspective, not just from each of the states. I think it's a good thing. But yes, you're right. The COVID-19 plan is one that includes everybody. Any further discussion?
Speaker,
Who's that?
Florida.
Oh, Florida, Herbert.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just very few minor concerns that I like to raise relating to the report. First is relevant to the airport extension on which is my main concern. I want to express my great disappointment to the company that's supposed to do the project, because while I was there during our last special session, I had the chance to meet twice with Larry Adams, and the only excuse that he kept telling me was that he's lacking a captain to take his ship out to Ta. And so I was giving him a lot of suggestion and all that, but he doesn't seem to really, care about it. And now I want to ask if there is a way, I don't know, we should extend this request to President, whether the Chairman Colon or whoever, Vice Speaker, since he's in Pohnpei, if they can ask President to ask TCNI to give Larry Adams a captain to take his ship out to Ta and take all the cargoes that are needed for the project on Ta, because that's the only pretext or excuses that he has been telling me. So I hope somebody will extend this request to President. And in addition to that, I want to ask something about the so-called quarantine and isolation and all that. Let's take the example of high tide. So when people go there to be quarantined, and who's going to feed them there? The restaurant at high tide, or how are they going to be fed? And in addition to that, while we were there during our, I think last session, twice we had a hearing with, we had hearings with the coronavirus task force, and I kept asking, how come they're not requesting WHO and CDC to bring in the proper equipment and train our own people to do the testing? And until now, I haven't heard anything, because I think that's very critical, the testing part of the so-called coronavirus stuff and all that. Because like here in Guam, they come to the hospital right away, they test them and they say, oh, positive. But us, if we don't have the proper equipment and proper training for our people there, we'll have to send out our specimen, and either to Guam or to Hawaii. And it will take about a week or so before we can actually receive the result. So I think it's very urgent and critical that we request CDC and WHO to look into this seriously, if they can provide the proper equipment or machine and have some kind of a training like this, teletraining, like what we're doing, so that our people can be ready to test the people who have the symptom right away. And that's the thing that I really want to express. I know no one will die if I don't express, but I'm really much concerned about what should be done at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Florida Harbor.
Yes.
On the issue of the
Yes.
airport, I will
Yes.
ask that to the German of TNC to work closely with the president on that, so we can,
Well,
move the
Speaker.
project. It's been delayed for too long.
Yes, Speaker.
Speaker,
Chairman Kulan first, and Chairman Perman. Chairman Kulan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In regards to the statement made by our good floor leader, yes, during our last session, I read a letter to Secretary of DCNI that I was demanding that they will have to look for another contractor to do the project in the. I also requesting that they have to terminate the contractor because they've been breaching our contract, and that's what I asked them to do. And as of now, I haven't received any feedback from them so far. We will follow up with that. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Kulan, for that response to leader's concern. Chairman Perman? Chairman Perman, you have the floor.
Yeah, just to address floor leaders' concerns regarding the one of the we actually, the president this morning said that they're actually looking into it. He actually met with the owner of the company to talk to him regarding this. But I think one of the issues right now is the quarantine. Coming from Pohnpei with all his equipment going to Chuk, I think the declaration by both two governors will make it a little bit harder for them to mobilize. And regarding the quarantine, yes, if you read my letter regarding the quarantine, a little bit of disappointment in how the state and the national not working together to address the issues at the quarantine areas. And lastly, but not the test kit for us able to address the testing. President told the committee to wait on the president this morning that the test kits are coming in by hopefully by next week, so we can actually really start testing our own people here on island. You notice that if you watch the news, basically every morning, every country is having problem with having test kits around, the right kind of test kit to test these COVID-19. So hopefully by next week, we will get our test kits. And I cross my finger and pray to God that nothing in FSM so far. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Perman. I just want to add a few things. We had a hearing with the Troop Task Force on the COVID-19. and the other officials of the state. And what we learned is that for troop, their quarantine places are now 75% complete, and the isolation facilities are 60 plus% complete. So they're on their way, but still, yeah, we should have them in place already, all of them. But yes, you're right, Florida Harbor. Those test kits are only as good as the people administering them. So you're absolutely correct in saying that we need the trained people to, administer those and to make sure that they are done properly. Because if they're not done properly, they're useless. And same, so we need trained people, and you're correct. And I can tell you this: the people in True, using True as an example, they actually told us that almost every day they're doing what we call IPC. I think it has to do with preventative and controls trainings, and they're doing this almost every day. And the only concern that we raise is regarding the ability of our health workers and frontline people to be able to stay in their jobs when the infection arrives. Because that is the question we raised with respect to the ability of our people to be able to continue in their job when the virus arrives. Because I think some have already expressed their fear that if it arrives, they might as well lose their job instead of taking the risk. So it is the kind of thing that it's a human instinctive response, but I think as trained health people, they should be able to, get beyond that. Any other discussion before we? If none, there's no objection.
Speaker,
Yes.
Speaker, thank you. A real quick one. Thanks for sharing us.
Last one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing us on the update on the Chuk State Task Force. I also met with the Koshai State Task Force, and this is my concern. When I look at the COVID-19 response framework, and you made reference to the budget of 20 million for each of the state and the national government. And for example, in case of isolation facility, I think that's one of the greatest challenges for Koshai State. 170,000 for isolation facility. Over last week, the leadership informed me that they have identified a location to construct a prefab 24-bedroom facility, totally new facility, and therefore need 1.2 million. That's the funding they're requesting from the carryover to build that. And I thought that's an excellent idea because the current hospital needs expansion anyway. It's not enough. Capacity is not nearly enough, and it's a very old hospital. So I thought that construction of a new facility, 24-bedroom facility, is a great idea. But my point is that in the budget, 170,000 isolation facility, but we need 1.2 million at least to fund that. So my point is that, again, this is a work in progress. We need to continue to monitor both the needs of the states and the funding necessary to implement their respective preparation activities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Palik. I'm sure the Koshai Task Force is working closely with our national task force to make sure that those needs are addressed. Just for a part of the response to the floor leader's concern about the quarantine and who will feed the people, who will take care of them. Those are part of the budget that they submitted, so it's in there. So we will continue to assist our states in their efforts to make sure the quarantines are effective and the isolation places are also, suitable for our sick people. Okay. Any further discussion? If none, there's no objection. Discussion is closed. So clearly. Okay, so we come back. Okay. Congress is back in session. I will reopen discussion on the oral report. Chairman Romulo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon to members. I wish to express my concern and register on record regarding the oral report presented by the good Vice Speaker and Chairman of Health. If I'm not mistaken, I heard the report that there were a case or incidents where our citizens are on ships and President had to bring them in through the surveillance. And if that's true, I was disappointed that it had happened because we have many citizens who wants to come in to their respective places. And I hope we don't use our power to bring in only certain citizens. If we have closed our borders, then let's close it for everybody. Let's not bring in others, but neglect others who also want to come in and be with their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Romulo. That's a legitimate concern. How to address that? Did the president say why these people were allowed in when there is this ongoing lockdown? Vice Speaker Moses and Chairman Berman, care to enlighten our colleagues?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, if I may.
Go ahead.
May I? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was made known to us that we had several observers and also our crew on the surveillance vessel not being allowed in due to quarantine issues. However, the president stated that was a misunderstanding and they had resolved the issue here in Pompey State with regards to those individuals. So we currently have several observers still on ships elsewhere that need to be brought back into port here in Pohnpei. And so they're working with the Pohnpei state government and seeing how they can come back. But it was the surveillance issue because it was interstate that the issue of quarantine was with them. And I believe they resolved that issue yesterday or this morning with regards to those. But it was the concern that was really on the minds of the leadership in Ponte were the observers to determine where they have been and what vessels they've been interacting with outside. So they got that issue resolved, and the two that were already here in Ponte were allowed off so that the ships can continue on to their home ports. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Vice Speaker Moses. Is that clear enough, Chairman Romulo? It's one of our surveillance vessels themselves who just been traveling. And so there was a misunderstanding and that was cleared up. So it's not so much that they violated any of our lockdown or short recess subject to call of the chair. Chairman,
I want to come back.
session, before we close debate, Chairman Romulo, you have the last word. No objection. Debate is now closed on the discussion of the oral report. So let's vote. Those in favor of adoption of the oral reports by our committee to wait on the president, say yes.
Yes.
No. Motion carried. The oral reports by Vice Speaker Moses and the committee to wait on the president is adopted. Okay. Any other special report, Chief Clerk?
There are none, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, next item.
Mayor,
Next item, Chief Clerk. Next item.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, item 16, assignment of measures and communications. We have a referral sheet number 21-57.
Okay, members, Chairman and members, take a look at that for your planning purposes. You have a point of privilege, Chairman Romulo.
motion to stand in recess until 10 tomorrow. Second.
And it's been moved and seconded that Congress stand in recess until tomorrow at 10 in the morning, troop time, and 11 a.m. Pohnpei time. Those in favor of that motion say yes. Opposed, no. Motion carried.
No.
Congress now stands in recess until tomorrow at 10 troop time and 11 Pohnpei time.